People are saying Donkey Kong Bananza is the best Nintendo game to release since Breath of the Wild, so I had to beat it for myself to see if it's really that good. A week prior to release, I beat through Mario Odyssey just so I could have an accurate comparison fresh on my mind. And I'm glad I did, but as much as I want to compare this to Mario Odyssey, it's very hard to do. From the moment you turn the game on, you can tell that Bonanza was made by the same team that made Odyssey. But these two games are wildly different, having their own gimmicks that make them stand out from one another in the best way possible.
Do you want to dig a hole? There's a 0% chance of that happening. Okay, let's try that again. Get your shovel!
The main gimmick in Donkey Kong Bananza is that you can break pretty much everything you see. And from the moment I turned the game on, all the way until the credits rolled, I was breaking everything I could because it was so satisfying. Up until the game released, I was convinced that digging was going to be a novelty. But I was dumb and wrong, and I am willing to accept that. Whether you're carving a path through a mountain or just digging for buried treasure, this is where the game truly shines. I've played a load of games that have destructible environments, but nothing to this scale. It doesn't matter if you're at the beginning of the game or towards the end, digging is as simple as punching your way through a mountain. But of course, it's not the only tool you have. Donkey Kong controls perfectly. You can tell the Odyssey team was working on this because Donkey Kong is just as fluid, if not more fluid than Mario was in Odyssey. Donkey Kong has the ability to pick up objects and rip chunks directly out of the ground. If you're holding something and you punch, you swing it like a weapon, but the best part about this is that you can surf on random chunks of terrain. While surfing, you can go incredibly fast, and you can chain that into some disgusting combos to cover an insane amount of distance. And when you put it all together, the movement in this game is some of the best I have ever felt in a 3D platformer. It is simple enough for all ages to pick up and play and do well, but if you want to get good, there is so much room for growth, striking a perfect balance between being accessible and deep. But the part of the game I didn't have high hopes for was the story. Of course, you play as Donkey Kong.
I would have never known that.
Donkey Kong is at work at the ingot aisle digging for golden bananas. But during his shift, something causes the entire mine to fall towards the center of the earth. While investigating what happens, he meets a little rock dude and together they go on an adventure. Along the way, you're introduced to another character, Pauline, who joins you on your journey. And together you go through different layers of the earth in order to stop the Void Company from stealing all of the golden bananas. The main premise is very simple, and that part's not going to win any awards, but the longer you play, the better the story gets, giving me one of my favorite stories in the Mario universe. Like I said earlier, in a lot of ways, this is very similar to Mario Odyssey, with the main point of comparison here being that you travel from world to world collecting some sort of large valuable currency, in this case being the golden bananas. Just like with Odyssey's Power Moons, there are a ton of bananas on every level that you can explore and uncover, but this time there is a good reason to want to collect as many as you can. For every 5 bananas you collect, you're given a skill point. And Donkey Kong has a ton of upgrades you can spend these on throughout the game, which makes the progression feel incredible. When I was playing Odyssey, I wanted to collect all of the Power Moons, but there was nothing pushing me to do it. But this time, there's an actual reason to want to collect these bananas. The more you collect, the more useful Donkey Kong becomes, unlocking the ability to carry more items, get more hearts, become stronger, or even unlock new moves altogether. Each of the worlds has a ton of bananas just scattered about. Some are in some obvious places, others are locked behind challenges, and of course you get a bunch by beating a boss. But the way they're spread out is perfect because you're getting just enough to encourage you to explore all of the nooks and crannies in a world, but they're not throwing too many at once that makes you feel overwhelmed. Out of all of the ways you get bananas though, my favorite is the challenge courses. There is a ton of variety in all of the challenges. Some have you taking on a group of enemies in a short amount of time, others have you destroying a building as fast as possible, but the best of the best here is the ones that are structured like a Donkey Kong Country level. There are challenge maps in the game that take you directly into a 2D platformer, and this is one of my favorite parts of the entire game. Whenever I would come across a challenge level, I would just hope it was one of these. They perfectly combine the new features of Bonanza with the 2D platforming action of Donkey Kong Country, and I am obsessed with these levels. I hope that we get a DLC that is just a collection of levels in this style because I would buy it no questions asked. Collecting bananas in this game is rewarding and addicting. Whether you stumble across one by digging randomly, or you earn a couple by defeating a boss, every time I see a banana, I have to go get it. But after a boss fight, the game does something so simple but brilliant. After you beat a boss fight, the bananas fall into a hole. And of course, being Donkey Kong, you have to go after them. But by having the bananas fall into a hole, it encourages you to keep going and continue exploring the world. And this simple design choice kept me absolutely addicted to this game until I beat it. This delayed the reward of beating a boss fight until you had gotten to the next area. You have to jump into the hole after them, and you have a Tears of the Kingdom style falling moment where you crash through the earth until you get to the next layer, which isn't my favorite part of the game, but at least it's interactable in some capacity instead of having a blank, boring loading screen. But once you land and get to the bananas, you're already in the next area. And at that point, you might as well just check it out and continue exploring. And there were so many times that I thought, I'm gonna put down the game and I'm gonna go on to the next thing, but then I would start exploring and go through the entire next world and get absolutely hooked. It may have been a small design choice, but it was a brilliant way to keep me invested on what was going on in the world. But this transition wouldn't keep you hooked unless the worlds themselves were just as good. And I don't think there is a single world in the entire game that I can say is bad. As you progress through the game, you're getting deeper and deeper towards the center of the earth. And though you're going down so logistically it doesn't make a lot of sense, each of the layers you explore has their own charm, personality, and gimmicks that I absolutely adore. The Ingot Isle serves as a great tutorial level showing you all of the different mechanics in the game, like how to dig, get past thorns, and surf on objects, but each of the subsequent levels brings you on a completely different journey, having their own gimmicks and themes, and some of them even have their own population of unique characters. The first full world you explore is the Lagoon Lair, a world full of water and apes, and the more you explore it, the more entertaining it is. And it is a great first world because there is a ton to do your first time going through, but as you progress through the game and get more skill points, it gives you a ton of reasons to come back and see what you missed. This is also the first world that introduces you to a reoccurring set of characters known as the Elders. These giant characters are the chiefs of whatever layer you're on, who for some reason all left their distinguished careers to throw it all away to become a DJ.
Hey boss, I just wanted to let you know that I quit. Just email me your notice, but why are you leaving? It was about time I pursue my true passion of being a DJ, known as Mix Master Midas. Are DJs even a thing anymore? And also, how did you change your glasses like that?
Each of the layers has something going on, so they enlist DK's help to figure out how they can fix it. But in order to do so, Donkey Kong has to go out and gather fragments of a record and bring them back to the Elders so Donkey Kong can earn a new Bonanza power. These powers allow you to turn into various forms that give you a different effect depending on what animal you turn into. The first one you get, fittingly, is the Kong form, which allows you to become a much more powerful version of DK, which gives you the ability to use a charge punch to break pretty much anything you can see. And like Donkey Kong himself, these forms have different abilities you can use skill points to unlock to make them even better. My main complaint with Odyssey is that using captures in order to solve puzzles was very limited. You would have to have the specific capture available on that world in order to use it, and none of the captures felt as deep as I wish they would. But by having the ability to use these at all times makes it so you can solve puzzles in a much more satisfying way. There is no wrong answer to how you should take on a puzzle in any of the given worlds, and these Bonanza powers do an incredible job adding on to the variety and ways that you can tackle any of the challenges that come across your path. A lot of the worlds are going to have their own unique characters that only exist in their lair, but there's one type of character that you'll run into very regularly, and they are known as Fracttones. These weird-eyed crystal creatures are in every layer of the world, and they're not just there for fun dialogue and to obliterate with a punch. A lot of them have some pretty unique uses that come in handy. Some of them you can feed gold and they'll grow like a tree, others will destroy unbreakable blocks in your path so you can get past, and others run stores you can use to buy various items. In a very similar way to how they changed bananas to be a better version of the Power Moon, giving you an actual reason to want to collect as many as possible, now when you go to the store to buy an outfit, all of the various costumes are going to have a different effect. None of the effects are all that game breaking, but the idea of having different costumes give you different abilities is so nice. There are options that don't have any effect, like DK's fur color, which is nice, but being able to change your tie and pants in order to get different status effects was a very nice touch. Even if for most of my playthrough, Donkey Kong looked like an absolute psychopath.
How could you have possibly thought that was a good outfit? Oh, I'm sorry you don't understand what pure performance looks like.
Arguably the most useful form of Fracttone is the Architectone, a name that I despise to my core. But with this, you pay a fee and you get a permanent place to rest in the world. The more you build, the more expensive they are, but the stronger they get, giving you bonus hearts, the ability to buy items, and change your outfit in various locations around the world will always be useful. But my favorite part about this is the subtle details. Not only will these sometimes open up a new path you may not have realized is there, but when Donkey Kong and Pauline go to sleep, they give you the ability to have a conversation with Pauline right before you go to bed. And this makes every part of the story feel so much more satisfying. It's these little conversations that help build this relationship, and I adore this. They always have something to do with the world you're in or the adventure you're currently going on. And no matter how many times I did it, I made sure I listened to everything they said because it added more to the story, which made it even better. With this being the first 3D Donkey Kong game since Donkey Kong 64 in 1999, I was excited to get back into a game where I could collect as many things as possible. And Donkey Kong Bananza delivered on that to the highest possible caliber. The amount of collectibles in this game at times can be overwhelming. Of course, the main collectible here is bananas, but that is far from the only thing that you can collect on your journey. There's banana chip coins that you can use to trade for various items like bananas. Every so often when you're defeating an enemy, you'll be given a CD, which will have one of the game's many songs available, which I absolutely love. If a game has the ability to listen to the soundtrack, I am going to use it. And I love the rush I get from seeing a CD drop from an enemy where I drop everything to make sure I collect it before it disappears. And the second most notable type of collectible are the fossils. Throughout each world, there are a couple different kinds of fossils. There are small ones you'll find scattered about, medium-sized ones that are pretty rare, and one giant fossil that you cannot miss but is usually decently hard to obtain. And hunting these down was so much fun. You can use these to buy customization options like outfits, and there's even a nice menu to track all of the banana gems and fossils in each world to make sure you're getting them all. And I am so glad they added this menu because it's going to make 100%ing this game so much easier. But of course, one of the things I was most excited to do in this game was beat up enemies. Donkey Kong has had a long history of throwing hands with anything in sight, and Bonanza made sure that Donkey Kong stuck to his roots. For the most part, the combat is very simple. You just beat up whatever's in sight. You can do this in a few ways, whether it's by punching or throwing terrain, but a majority of the enemies you're going to encounter can be beaten with a few well-timed punches. Early on, combat is very simple, and it does get progressively more challenging throughout the game, where you'll have to incorporate various elements of the environments you're in to take on certain enemies. And though it's very simple, just like the digging, it is endlessly satisfying. Watching chunks fly off enemies as you beat them down is something I didn't expect to happen in the game, but it makes a lot of sense given the context of what these enemies are. But there is one major problem with this, and that is that the enemies and most of the boss fights are incredibly easy. I'll give the enemies a pass because they don't need to be very challenging, but the bosses are unacceptably simple. When you start the game, there's a difficulty selection, and I really wish there was a hard mode here that would have made the combat a little bit more engaging, but especially in the first half of the game, most of the bosses can be defeated without breaking a sweat. Towards the later half of the game, and especially close to the end, it does get pretty challenging, but for my taste, a majority of the bosses were just a little too easy. But that being said, the combat is still incredibly fun. Combining Bonanza powers with DK's standard abilities always leads to combat feeling fun, and though certain parts lack challenge, that didn't take away from the overall experience being great. But now it's time to talk about the story. Warning, if you do not want to be spoiled for the events that take place in Donkey Kong Bananza, you should skip to the time shown on screen. You have been warned. The story in-game is something that I didn't expect to like nearly as much as I did. The odd rock I mentioned earlier ends up being Pauline. The Void Company, led by Void Kong, are trying to collect all of the bananas they possibly can to get to the center of the Earth. And at the very core of the planet lies the Banandium Root, a magical object that grants any wish to whoever wields it. And throughout the game, Void, Poppy, and Grumpy are trying their best to get to the core before Donkey Kong and Pauline. And they manage to do just that, getting to an eerily familiar looking Banandium Root, where Donkey Kong, Pauline, and Void have their final battle. But all doesn't go according to plan because what you thought was the Banandium Root ended up just being the stomach of King K. Rool.
I knew that stomach from the moment I saw it. How could you possibly know by his stomach? Oh, just years of being a Nintendo fan and nothing else.
For everybody who's been wondering where K. Rool has been, apparently he has been stuck underground, patiently waiting to be freed so he can go after the Banandium Root. And from that point, Donkey Kong and Pauline go after him to try and get to the Banandium Root before he can. But unfortunately, their efforts are in vain and K. Rool gets there first. And using the Banandium Root, he goes head to head with Donkey Kong in the Battle of the Ages. But of course, with this being a Donkey Kong game, when you defeat him, it's over.
Lies and slander. All right, calm down, I'm getting to it.
When I beat K. Rool, I was pretty disappointed because it wasn't that challenging of a fight. And when the credits started to roll, I was disappointed because I was expecting more of a challenge. But then I started reading the credits and I realized that it was far from over. DK and Pauline used the Banandium Root to go back to the surface so Pauline can go home. But on the way back up, K. Rool is not done yet and tries to intervene by any means necessary. But after narrowly avoiding him on the way back up, you arrive in New Donk City, and my jaw literally dropped. But that joy was very short-lived, because you find out that K. Rool now has control of the Banandium route again. And this time he learned from his mistakes and became even more powerful than ever. And you have to rush through New Donk City as it's actively falling apart, and fight him for the second time, this time in the form of K. Rool, King of Rock. And this is the best boss fight in the game, and it's not even close. There is a good level of challenge where you have to balance using all of the different types of Bonanza powers in order to win. K. Rool's new form is menacing and interesting looking, and the entire time I was on the edge of my seat. And the way they handled the end of the game was borderline perfect. My only real critique is that I wanted the big bad villain to remain Void Kong throughout the entire game. I love K. Rool, and I'm glad he made a return after all these years, but I would have loved it if K. Rool and Void worked to take on Donkey Kong together. Because I love that we got a new villain, but to see them pushed to the side in favor of K. Rool was kind of disappointing. But regardless, I still think the story and ending were incredible and some of my favorite in 3D platforming history. But there's one more thing that was added to Bonanza that I don't really understand, but I appreciate nonetheless, and that is the DK Artist Mode, a small 3D modeling software in the game where you can build whatever you want. I made a Sega. I've only messed around with this a few times, and I feel like this was a late addition just to add something to use mouse controls. But even if it was, I do like that they added this just because it's infinitely replayable. I'm hoping down the line they add more customization options because what's here is nice, but pretty limited. At the end of the day, I think that Donkey Kong Bananza is a love letter to people who grew up playing the Rare games. Whether you played Donkey Kong Country, DK64, Banjo-Kazooie, or even Conker's Bad Fur Day, this feels like Nintendo's first attempt to replicate the magic of the 3D collectathon Rare games that we used to get on consoles like the N64. And it brings so many great new things to the table that I have never seen done in other 3D platformers. Whether you're a fan of collectathons or not, this is a game that I think everybody should try out at least once, even if that means just going to a kiosk at a store and playing the demo. So yes, I think Donkey Kong Bananza is that good, and I'm giving it a 9.4 out of 10.
But Midas, wait! You have to listen to this first. Okay, what could be so important? Alright, you're right, never mind. This is a -5 out of 10.